All right, football fans, welcome to another episode of the Call Sheet Daily. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. This is our Whiteboard Wednesday episode where we talk to real football coaches about the great game of football. My guest today, really interesting guest because he's had a fascinating coaching journey. He's coached in high school, in college, in the NFL. He's at the University of Pennsylvania coaching right now, and I want to bring in Phil Eisenstein. Welcome, Coach.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be a fun conversation, and our topic's going to be defensive game planning. Last week we talked about offensive game planning, and I got some people hit me up and said like, "Hey, man, do a similar show on the defensive side of the ball." So I wanted to bring in Phil because his coaching journey's been kind of fascinating. Tell us a little bit about it. How have you arrived at where you are these days?
Jeez, it's been a roller coaster ride. So I started off as a student assistant at Arizona State University, just volunteering with the staff over there. I went through 2 staffs during my time there. Learned a lot during that time, mostly about hard work and everything that kind of goes into a Division I program. It was something that I was completely ignorant to at the time, and just kind of learned about how the business is run. After I finished graduation, I landed a spot with the Cleveland Browns, where I was a video assistant, but they also, there were a few of us young guys in there. They called us 2020s because we worked for 20 hours a day for $20,000 a year.
Glamorous, very glamorous.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it's exactly what you think in the NFL. So I was working in the video department a little bit, and then my first year I was working on both the offensive and defensive side, and then my second year I was exclusively on the defensive side, as far as breaking down film, drawing the opponent plays, creating the playbook, scouting reports, all that type of stuff. So I was able to learn a lot about game preparation during that time. After that, I was able to get a graduate assistant job at the University of Miami with the defensive line. So I spent a lot of time learning defensive line, and then I did a lot on special teams, which really helped me, gain an edge when it comes to interviewing for jobs and looking for things. Having that special teams aspect to you definitely gives you an advantage because not everybody has that. So if you can have somebody that can help on special teams, it's extremely important. After that, I came back home. I did 2 years coaching Atlantic City High School, and then I took a long time off from coaching after that, 7 years actually, which is crazy. But when I look back and think about it, it was just something that I felt like I didn't want to do anymore, whether I was burnt out or a couple bad experiences. I think it was a little mix of both. But it was something I didn't want to do anymore. And then, 7 years later, just kind of talking with my fiance, I think I wanted to give it another shot. And I headed over to Cedar Creek High School as defensive line coach. And I just had a ton of fun, just came in with a more mature approach to it. You grow up a little bit, you figure out that things that you were doing before wasn't really working, and an undefeated season doesn't hurt either. So I had a ton of fun. It was really great, and we had a lot of success. And then the following year I came over and worked for you. It was actually less than a year, but another great experience, great connections with the staff. Got to coach with my dad for another year, which was awesome, and which I'm really grateful for. And then, unfortunately, I had to leave you so early. I had the opportunity to coach sprint football at the University of Pennsylvania. Started out as a part-time position, and then recently I was promoted to full-time. And here I am now, back doing what I originally started. And when I left coaching, I didn't think that I'd be back here, but you keep your head down and grind, and you figure out a way and let things play out the way they play out, and it worked out. So here I am, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, the coaching road is rarely a straight one. a lot of twists and turns on that road.
If you could stay in the same spot for a long time, you are one of the few lucky ones. I probably averaged about 2.5 years at every place I've been, maybe less than that. I wish it was different. Right now, I'm in a good, stable position, it seems like. So, I'm happy to have a little bit of stability.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm definitely the outlier. 30 plus years in the same spot makes me the exception, not the rule.
No, it's great to be able to have that. Not too many coaches get to have that. So
yeah, I never had a good reason to leave. So
that's it. Good reason to leave, and people want you there, so you're able to stick around and build something that you can be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that your time in Cleveland, you spent a lot of time working on game prep and game planning. That's what we're going to get into. So let's start with this question. On the defensive side of the ball, Monday morning or Sunday night or whenever it might be, and you're starting your game prep for the following week, where do you begin? Right? Where does this process start?
For me, if you're in the NFL or something, I would like to watch the TV copies of the game first, just kind of get an overall feel of the game, what these coaches are thinking when they hit a little bit of adversity. Does the game plan change a little bit? Sometimes the announcers will give you a little nugget that you might not have known during that game. So, if I'm able to watch a TV copy, that's always great, and just kind of run that through. And then after that, hopefully you have somebody helping you break down the film. Everywhere is different. Sometimes, the defense coordinator is the one breaking down the film because that's just what you have. And I like to start off with first and second down. So, everything I'm looking at is first and second down. I'll kind of separate that into their run and pass, and just kind of see, where their tendencies are as far as formation and what they're running out of those formations. My philosophy is take away what they do best, expose what they do worst. So, those top 2-3 plays, I'm going to take them away from you. You're not going to be able to run them. So, a lot of the planning that I'll do for that week will be taking away what you do best. I can't let you rely on your bread and butter. And then, then we go, what do you do worse? Whether that's a weak link on your team, whether that's, a play that you don't run well, something that I think I can expose. Then I'll start working that. And then everything in the middle is just, we're going to play ball. I have my base set of plays that we do during training camp that are going to be our bread and butter too. But then each week, I kind of customize a game plan for what I think will expose our opponent. So they'll get a couple different plays during that week, and how in depth that gets depends on the level, and it really depends on time. A lot of guys on the high school level have to have teaching jobs, and some of those have you working all day without being able to work on the game plan. So I think a lot of coaches have to realize that you can't do everything, and it's okay to be very simplistic and just do those simple things well. And that's kind of where I am with everything. When I first started coaching, I was young. I thought I could out scheme and do a million different things, and that's going to do it. But at the end of the day, you got kids who are in school, you got coaches who are teaching, and you're not going to be able to do all those things that you think are gonna win ball games. So, it's just tightening down and doing the few things that you do really well, and checking out your opponent and seeing how they would try to expose it and adjusting to it. So my first day would always be first and second down. The next preparation day would be third down, and trying to work those in different field zones, different whether, and then also as third and long, third and intermediate, third and short. and get those money downs, because they're extremely important as far as momentum and, obviously field position. And then that next day, that's red zone, goal line, short yardage, backed up. I try to keep things situational. And sometimes, why I like to watch that game tape is, sometimes there isn't a difference. And you have to recognize that, maybe the red zone, we traditionally think it is as maybe the 20-yard line and in, but maybe that offense coordinator's play calling changes at the 35-yard line and in. So maybe it won't be a traditional red zone of 20 and in, it could be 35 and in, and you got to kind of figure out where on that field do those play calls start to change. And that's kind of, how I look at everything. And then, that last day or the day before walkthrough, I just kind of look through any kind of gadgets, any kind of special situations where I think that we can get hurt in some type of ways. I won't spend too much time on it because, you don't see too many gadgets during the games. And then if you do see it on tape, it's very rare that it gets run again. But it will be something that I go over because, if you get beat on it, you didn't go over it. That's on me.
You mentioned Phil, you mentioned that you have kind of a balance between your core schemes and then things that you're going to do weekly based upon your opponent. Yeah. Is that part of the process of taking away what they do best? Like when you say, all right, let's say, maybe you're an over front as your base, maybe you're a tight front as your base, whatever. But you look at your opponent and you say, we got to stop power. They're running the hell out of power. And so I don't know if we can do it in our straight over. They got good angles. They're going to gap us, blah, blah, blah. Is that where those adjustments come in, essentially saying that we're going to tweak our scheme in order to nullify what they're doing best?
Exactly. And I try to keep it as simple as I can. Like it could be something that we do it could be an adjustment that we do within our base scheme. So it won't necessarily, it can be, but it won't necessarily be, all right, guys, we have this whole new defense that we're going to throw in for our opponent. It's my job to kind of make an adjustment based off of what we already do to put them in position and keep it simple for our guys. So, they're not getting overloaded with all this information. I mean, even at Penn, we have some really brilliant players who are going to be world leaders at some point in their lives. And I try to keep things as simple as I can for them too. I mean, just because they're brilliant doesn't mean that I have to make it difficult for them. So it's my job to kind of, look at what the offense is doing and try to make adjustments within what we do to put us in a better position to succeed on the field. And sometimes you might have to throw in something completely different. And that's why you practice it. And if it doesn't look good in practice, I'm not putting it in the game. I refuse to put anything in the game that we're not running well in practice because you're asking for trouble. And that also comes with not overloading our kids, and depending on the level that you're coaching, sometimes you'll have more time to work on it and sometimes you won't. I mean, our priority here is academics. So, if they have academic things that they need to work on, that's going to come first before football. If you're in the NFL, that's your full-time job. So, you're able to basically create a whole separate playbook just for another opponent because everybody's time is solely dedicated to beating that opponent. So you have to be able to adjust to your situations and try not to make things so complicated just for the sake of making it complicated, and don't try to do everything because that's not going to work for every team. And sometimes you get information overload for some of these guys and it just becomes too much. And now you're battling something else that you really didn't need to battle to begin with.
Yeah. Slow mind equals slow feet. That's something I've always tried to marry myself to philosophically, but no, it doesn't always work out that way because sometimes as coaches, this, you fall in love with the whiteboard. You look, we can scheme the hell out of this. But, your point is a good one about, well, maybe it doesn't translate to what we're able to do in terms of our guys, our personnel, et cetera.
Right. And then that was my biggest growth from, before I took that break in coaching to after is, I came in thinking, oh, I got this huge playbook. I got all these schemes. We can run all this stuff. But if my guys don't know it well or don't have the time to learn it, what good is it? Or even have time to practice and execute it? Because it's one thing to know it on the board and everything, but you got to rep it too. And do you have time to rep it? It also depends on the coach that you're working for. What is he trying to get out of practice? How long is your practice? There's so many different factors, and you kind of got to be a chameleon to what your situation is and be able to adjust. I mean, sometimes you can do 20 different things. Sometimes you can do 2 things, and you have to be okay with that. And whatever that may be good at those things and go from there.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this, Phil. Football is very much matchup oriented. If I'm thinking offensively and I'm game planning, and one of the things I want to do when I'm breaking down the defensive personnel is I want to say things like, hey, how can I get my best receiver matched up on your weakest defender? Defensively, how important are matchups as well? How do you use that mentality, right? How can I get my best guys matched up on their worst guys in some fashion? Maybe it's pass pro, maybe it's coverage, whatever. How do you integrate that into your game plan?
That's something that I look for immediately. I try to defend players before I defend plays. If I see there's a weapon that might hurt us, and might be adjusting that defense to double that guy all game to take him out. It just depends. If you have that guy who's just way better, and you think that, and you're kind of prepared for that. You're ready for them to try to match that guy up against our worst. But whether that's our corner and we bring the safety over for help, that's something that I'll definitely game plan too. I'm trying to do the exact same thing. And I do that on the defensive line a lot. All my guys on the defensive line have to learn how to play every position on the defensive line. And we try to create those matchups too. But also at the same time, I might look and see, is my second best defensive lineman better than, can they beat your weakest link? And that way I don't have to use my best guy on your worst guy. I can use my best guy on your intermediate offensive lineman. And now I got 2 guys having success because my second best guy can beat your worst. So moving guys around to keep you uncomfortable. That's why I want my guys to learn as many positions as they can. I don't ever want a player to get comfortable working against somebody. So my guys will change positions throughout the game, especially on the defensive line. I can speak more on run game than I can pass. But yeah, just creating those matchups and not letting you get comfortable with that. And a lot of that comes with line movements and stuff too. Adjusting pre-snap and changing up those fronts. And just kind of exposing guys that way. I understand the offense is doing that for us, and we're going to try to do the same. So it just kind of becomes a chess match. I think a good thing that separates the great coaches from the good ones is be able to make adjustments during the game. So if you see those matchups starting to happen and seeing how they're doing it, if you can adjust to that during the game, I think that's extremely beneficial.
That's a good transition into what I wanted to ask you next, which was, as you're going through your game plan, obviously it's plan A, right? Here's what we want to execute. But what do you do when you're in a situation where it's not working? Or it's not going exactly I want to say it's failing, but it's not going the way that maybe you planned it. How much has to be built into your game plan each week to allow you to adjust? Do you have enough time and space to be able to essentially also include a plan B, or are you just tweaking plan A?
No, I usually will have a plan B ready to go, and that's something that I'll communicate with my guys. It might not be something that we work on a crazy amount during practice. But, if I'm going over film with them or going over our game plan, I also talk to them about what we're weak against in that situation. There's always going to be some kind of weakness in what you're doing defensively against what they're doing offensively. And I think it's important to know, for our guys to know where that weakness is, and how we can protect that. And it's something I'll also communicate to these guys. All right, if this doesn't go well in this situation, okay, we can either go back to what we've been doing, our basics, and play ball, or we can or I'll have another plan, and they'll know that plan ahead of time. But it might not be something that we completely rep. I hope our plan A is good enough that we don't need a plan B. But I'd be pretty stupid to not have something else in my back pocket. And a lot of times it's just going back to the basics for us. My plan B was, what I decided that would work for this specific opponent didn't. Let's go back to what our training camp basics and what we've been practicing for so long and getting really good at. That usually ends up being what I go back to.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think a lot of times coaches feel as though the answer is something new, when really the answer might be leaning into what is old, right? Let's just do what we do better. Let's double down on our fundamentals, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been key for me. I mean, especially coaching the defensive line, we kind of created a system that allowed us to just read and react to blocks without worrying about what the scheme was. The blocks will always take you to the ball. And for me, it's been isolating their vision to that block and learning how to react to it, that all the other stuff doesn't matter. You just have to trust that block's going to take you to the best spot you need to be to tackle that ball carrier. I remember when I was at Cedar Creek and we were playing Delsey, and they had the wing T, and I, backtrack, I interviewed for a defensive coordinator job at a high school in the past, and they asked, what are you going to do? What are your adjustments against the wing T? And they were shocked when I said, nothing. I'm going to change the front up to what I think is going to work, but I'll put my guys in that position, but they need to trust, follow that block, ignore all the noise around it, the motions, the misdirection, all that. That doesn't matter. The block that you're reading is going to take you to where you need to go. All right, guys aren't going to block you in a direction that the ball's going. That would be ridiculous. All right, so isolating that vision, doing your job is extremely important, and for them to be able to rely on those on that is extremely important. And just kind of have that tunnel vision of this is my job, this is what I need to read. Everything else is just crowd noise, and ignore it and trust that you'll be in the best position to succeed.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to get you out of here on this one.
Yeah.
So you've coached at all three levels, high school, college, pros. How much does the volume in your game plan vary from level to level? I mean, obviously, the amount of time you have in the NFL dwarfs what you have at the high school level. But does time necessarily equate to a lot more depth in the game plan?
I think the time definitely equates to a lot more depth, and it also equates to customizing your teaching style and your calls to make sure everybody can adjust to that. I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I have my Cleveland Browns training camp book right next to me as I was referring to things. So this thick.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was just for training camp, and we'd have another one probably about this thick for each opponent.
For those who can't see, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, Phil just held up a binder. That was probably, I was going to say as thick as a phone book, but young people would be like, what the hell's a phone book? It's about 5 inches thick.
Easily over 1,000 pages. And a lot of that's, recognizing offensive formations, our terminology and what each thing means, but it also has every coverage in there you could think of, and of what we were doing, defensive fronts, different schemes that we run, blitzes, everything like that. So, in the NFL, your time is solely dedicated to football during the season. in college, it's a big drop off. I mean, these guys still have to go to classes. There's still, a limited amount of hours that you can have with them, and you still want to keep things simple because you have such a diverse group of learners, and some can pick it up really quick, and some can. So, in the NFL, it's a lot about trying to figure out ways to get guys to learn what they're doing. And that's why, when you hear those NFL calls in the huddle, a lot of them are so long. It's literally telling everybody on the field what they're doing. You hope you don't have to do that, but a lot of times you do, because everybody learns differently. Not everybody can learn as fast as others. Here at Penn, I'm blessed with a group of guys that I can, pretty much tell them something once, and they'll know it. But on the back end of that is like getting them on field reps. It's one thing to know it, but it's another thing to be able to execute it. So, finding that balance. And then in high school, you got to keep things really simple. Like I said, a lot of these coaches have teaching jobs. I know it bothered the heck out of me when I was working for you and I was teaching at another school. I had to roll up to practice late, just get in there and my time dedicated to my students, and I had no breaks during the day. So, for me, it was about keeping things really simple and just getting really good at those simple things and being able to execute. So there's definitely a big jump. And I would attest all those jumps to time. I mean, for me, time is the world's most precious commodity. I mean, you don't know how much you have. You don't know when your time's up. And so I try to take advantage of every bit of time we have. And sometimes you'll have more and sometimes you'll have less, but you have to be able to adjust to those situations, and be able to game plan accordingly. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to win games on being complicated and trying to do everything. Try to get the best out of each player, and really that's what it comes down to.
Right. Coach, this was great. Very interesting stuff. Really appreciate your time and the conversation. And I would think that there's a lot here for young coaches who are listening to take away from this. So thank you so much.
No, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you're in a great spot, man. So enjoy the city and enjoy your time there, man. You landed on your feet.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. So
awesome.
See where it goes.
All right, that's our Whiteboard Wednesday episode here at the Call Sheet Daily. Join me again tomorrow for our Thursday show, and we'll finish out the week with some great topics. So for Phil Eisenstein, I'm Coach Kevin Smith. Everybody have a great day.